Hello BookTube, my name is Mary and this is Happily Ever Esch. So today I would like to share my top books of 2016. I read 50 books in 2016 and I would just like to show you what some of my favorites were this year. So I would say one of the things that I discovered in 2016 were short story collections. I think I read 5 short story collections this year, which is a pretty big chunk. 10% of my reading were short story collections, and I really enjoyed most of what I read. So I just wanted to share some of those with you. The first is Abby Jenai's The Last Animal. I saw this over at Mercedes' channel from Mercy's Bookish Musings, and I really enjoyed this collection. These are realist short stories that kind of twinge or are on the edge of being magical or kind of having some mystical element to them. They all center around an animal. Each short story has some sort of animal as a theme in the story. This definitely had my favorite short story out of all of 2016. It was called Silence, I believe. Yes, Silence, and it centers around a man who is terminally ill, and he kind of has this love for flying, and he's building a plane essentially, and that short story, it was beautiful, it made me cry, and I definitely plan on revisiting that one in the next year. It was absolutely beautiful, but I really enjoyed her writing. The stories were beautiful, the animal themes in it were really cool, how she tied animals into all of her stories, and I really enjoyed this collection. The next short story collection is Diving Bells by Lucy Wood. This is a short story collection that has definite magical realism themes to it. They all are kind of centered in myth. I think Lucy Wood grew up in Cornwall, and I think that's where kind of she gets her inspiration from the myths. I definitely enjoyed especially the beginning stories in this. The title story, Diving Bells, is about a woman who goes down in a diving bell in search of her lost husband. That was a beautiful story. The stories all kind of explore relationships in all different sorts, so romantic relationships, they explore parent and child relationships. There's a really beautiful story in here about a mother and her daughter, and kind of what happens when you grow up and when you learn your parents are real people. That one was really beautiful, but overall I really enjoyed this, and the longer I was away from the short story collection, the more I enjoyed it. I think when I first read it I was like, okay, but I definitely, the more I've thought about this, the more it's kind of stuck with me and really made an impact. So I really enjoyed this, especially if you enjoy magical realism elements and also kind of things inspired by the sea or water. I think you would enjoy the short story collection. And lastly, I have How to Breathe Underwater by Julie Oringer. This was also a recommendation from Mercedes over at Mercy's Bookish Musings. This is a realist short story collection, and it definitely focuses on young women from being children to preteens to teenage years, just all the different stages. It definitely has a very nostalgic feeling. I think especially those preteen teenager years, this captures those feelings very well, the feelings of childhood, of growing up, of changing. All the stories kind of have that similar theme and feeling to them, but this was just a great collection, especially if you enjoy realist stories. I also read Sweet Home by Cara Spray. I cannot find it, but that was also an excellent short story collection. It has a good mix of kind of magical realism and realist short stories, a good mix I think in there, and they were definitely beautiful stories about family and family relationships, and I really enjoyed that collection as well. For my next book, I have The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. This, I would say, is adult fantasy, and it is about our main protagonist, Kelsey, who has been raised in the woods by 2 caregivers, kind of Sleeping Beauty style, and the story starts off, the Queen's Guard is coming to pick Kelsey up so she can go to the Tear Throne and kind of take her rightful place as the queen, kind of dethrone her uncle and take her throne back. She has from the child been raised in the woods by herself with these two guardians who have kind of been pruning her and teaching her and filling her with knowledge so she can be the best queen that she can be. Essentially, there's lots of secrecy surrounding her mother's reign and why Kelsey was raised in the woods. Kelsey is a very strong character, but she also deals with insecurities, which I thought made her a very real character, but she also is very morally I guess centered or driven. She knows what she thinks is right, and she's going to do whatever she can to make that happen. This is also a very politically centered fantasy because Kelsey is going and taking her throne back. She is basically setting up a whole new governmental system. She's, you know, appointing people to be her advisors, and it's so interesting to see her relationship and dealing with people, and she's never dealt with people before. I mean, she's lived in the woods by herself with these caregivers, and that was an interesting dynamic, but I thought this was a great fantasy, especially if you enjoy political aspects to your stories. I think that you would really enjoy this book. Next, I have James Herriot's All Creatures Great and Small. This story was absolutely beautiful. This is James Herriot's memoirs and kind of his love story to the practice of veterinary science. He is a veterinarian kind of in the beginning of the 20th century. His memoir starts out of him kind of having this apprenticeship with this veterinarian in this small Yorkshire town. And so it's kind of just all the antics he gets into, just being a vet in this time period. I laughed out loud. It was hilarious, but it also has such touching and sweet moments. I also cried, and I don't often find myself laughing out loud when reading a story, but this one definitely did it for me. It was hilarious, it was sweet, it was touching, it was poignant. Also, this story I think is so good because of the time that James Herriot is practicing veterinary science. He is kind of in this weird place where it's not all of the old practices and kind of the outdated medicine, but it's not the completely new science and that we kind of moved into in the later part of the 20th century. It's kind of this in between and him working through that, and I don't know, it was just so interesting. The people and the characters are so rich. His writing is really beautiful, but really, I think, accessible and good. It's just good writing, and I definitely was so glad that I picked this one up. This was a recommendation from Kate Howe, and I am very grateful to her for introducing this story to me because I absolutely loved it. So. Another recommendation from Kate Howe, I have Louise Penny's Armand Gamache series. So I read Still Life this year, and I also read A Fatal Grace, the first two in the series. Still Life is the first story, and we kind of are introduced to Armand Gamache. We're introduced to the fictional Canadian city, or I guess township village of Three Pines, which I think is why I love these stories so much. I am obsessed with Three Pines. It is this cozy, quaint, cold town outside of Quebec, and it is just beautiful. I want to live in Three Pines. Three Pines is like now my dream home. But minus the murder. These are murder mysteries. I love the characters. I love Armand Gamache. I love how Louise Penny writes. It is beautiful. And I really enjoy the mysteries in these. I'm pretty, I would say, easy to please when it comes to mysteries. I'm in for the ride. I'm totally on board with whatever the author is trying to get me to think at that time. So I like mysteries that kind of tie up with a bow, but that being said, I like good writing too, and I think that these are so well written, high quality books, high quality characters, and again, Three Pines is just so cozy. And kind of just by my luck, I read Still Life in the fall time around Thanksgiving, which is where this book is set. I read A Fatal Grace, which is the second book during Christmas time, also when the book is set, and so I'm waiting for the third one now because it's set in the spring and it was so cool to read those two in their respective seasons that I want to wait for the third one as well, but it has been killing me because I want to go back to these stories so much. They're great and I loved them. So next book is a nonfiction. I listened to it on audiobook. It is called Bringing Up Bebe. One Mother Discovers the Secret of French Parenting, and that is by Pamela Druckerman. Yeah, Pamela Druckerman. I should give the caveat that I am not a parent, nor do I plan on being a parent for a while. So this is a story about a mother. It's told from Pamela's perspective as a journalist, kind of exploring motherhood in France and why it's so different from American motherhood and parenthood, and kind of the differences in our societies and why that is, and why French and American kids are seemingly so different. And so I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really accessible. I loved the way that Pamela told the story. I was enthralled. I kept wanting to go back for more. I thought I gained a lot of really good insight about what it means to be a parent. I thought I gained some really good tips, and I think a lot of it stuck. The way she told the story, I felt like I was able to absorb a lot of the information. So I would say if you're at all interested in children, in parenting, and kind of the dynamics in that, I think this is a wonderful book to pick up. And I, when reading the reviews, I saw a lot of people saying, you know, she's just reinventing the wheel. If they would just listen to, you know, your grandma, you wouldn't have to read this book. And that might be true, but I thought she did a wonderful job in presenting the information, and I really, really enjoyed this nonfiction listen. And I work with kids in my job now, and I was in the nanny in college and right when I got out of college, and I think it's a really valuable story to listen to even if you're just working with kids. So yeah, I really enjoyed Bringing Up Bebe. My last and definitely most beloved book of 2016, which was Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I loved this book. This was my first Dickens, well, I guess besides A Christmas Carol, but my first full Dickens novel, and I absolutely adored this. I really took my time with this when I read it. It took me about a month to read. I went through really slowly. His writing is so dense, but also so good. His characters are wonderful, and I adored this. So Great Expectations follows the story of young Pip and kind of his expectations in life. Pip is an orphan being raised by his sister and his sister's husband Joe, and when Pip is young, he has a run-in with a prisoner, and he also has a run-in with a very rich lady who kind of takes him as a companion, and her name is Miss Haversham. And just from there, kind of the expectations for the rest of Pip's life. I loved Pip. I know a lot of people complain about him because he can be a little brat, but also I think he's so real. He's real. He has real flaws, but he also, I think, grows so much and learns from his flaws. He's writing the story kind of in retrospect. So he's telling you the story and kind of pointing out, like, I was a real jerk here, or I made a mistake here, or why did I suck so much? He kind of points those out, and just that, to me, that shows so much growth as a character. I love Joe. Joe is Pip's, I guess, brother-in-law, and Joe is just the most pure, the most sweet character. I cried so many times just because of Joe's compassion and his heart. I love Joe as a character. There's just so many wonderful characters in this book. I don't reread very often, but I definitely think this is a book that I will be going back to again and again, and I definitely look forward to getting to some more Charles Dickens, but I'm also nervous because I loved this story so much, and I don't know if anything is going to compare, but yeah, I was totally enthralled, and I loved every second with this story. So favorite books that I read, I would love to know some of your favorites. So if you did a video or want to leave some down in the comments, I would love to know what you read and loved in 2016. And I hope that you guys are are having a great beginning of 2017. I know that I am. I've already read some really great books. I haven't been too disappointed by anything. So that's a good start of 2017. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're having a great day, and I hope to talk to you guys soon. Thanks so much.